Imagine having an AI assistant that not only generates content for your business, but also retrieves and analyzes your data to give you actionable insights. In a world where AI knowledge is becoming generic and universal, the real value is in the unique secrets and methods that set your business apart. Hey everyone, if we haven't met yet, my name is Andy O'Neill, and in today's video, I'm going to walk you through the setup of a generative AI system that's not just about general knowledge, but it is trained on your business-specific knowledge. It's about storing and leveraging your unique insights, giving you an edge over your competition. I'll show you how to integrate this system with Claude Desktop and GitHub and Dropbox for seamless file backup and version control. Okay, so let's dive in. But first, if you haven't seen my video number 1 in this series, I would ask you to go check out this playlist. I lay out a purpose and plan for how we're going to use this system, and you can find that here in this playlist. Also in the playlist is a great GitHub tutorial. I did not do it. That's why it's so great. You should watch it if you're new to GitHub or GitHub Desktop. There's some foundational learnings in that video that I'm going to skip in this video just for the sake of time. All right, so let's talk about what we're going to cover. First of all, I'm going to cover the GitHub setup from scratch. I'll show you how to create a new GitHub repository. That's the name of the bucket that holds your data. I'll also call that a repo in this video, most likely. Where to download starter repo content. I have that for you in a Dropbox folder that you can download for free, and modifying repo files. Number 2, we're going to talk about the Claude setup. We're going to set up your Claude profile preferences in Claude Desktop. We're going to set up the file system access in Claude Desktop, and I'm going to show you how to sync your files to GitHub. Then we're going to generate a framework example. We're going to save that locally, and then we're going to push that to GitHub, which that'll be your workflow moving forward as you create more secrets and things about you and your business that are going to train your Claude AI. All right, so let's talk about repository setup. Right here, I'm looking at my GitHub repository. This is the web version. This is where kind of the final files are stored and saved and protected. And this is a private repo. I'm going to give you access to the download of this repo and just for where, so you know where it came from. If you go here to code and download zip, it will download the entire repository. So I'm going to show you where to get that in just a second. But first we want to go to GitHub Desktop. And again, watch that tutorial video in the playlist. If you've not used this before, that'll help quite a bit. So we want to create a new repository. This might be your first repository that you've ever created this way. So I'm going to walk you through the steps how to do that. You're going to go up here to File, and you're going to say New Repository. And it's going to bring you a box where you create that repository either locally and eventually on the web. So I'm going to give this a repository name. I'm going to say YouTube Starter Demo. Okay. So this will be created like this. Oops, this cannot have an equal sign. It has to have a dash. There we go. You can add a description, and then we're going to do a local path. So I have on my Windows machine, I run Dropbox on my machine, and I have inside my Dropbox folder a GitHub folder. And that is where I store all of my repo files. I don't store anything else in there with 1 or 2 exceptions. So I'm going to click Choose. And so this repo is going to go in this directory. So I'm going to say Select Folder because it's going to create a new folder for the files inside of this GitHub directory. Why did I put it on Dropbox? Because Dropbox gives me version control, and if I accidentally delete something or want an old version of it, I can restore that. That's also something you can do on GitHub. So it's really a redundant version control on the files that I have locally. Do you have to have Dropbox? Nope. You can just use your file system. If you don't use Dropbox, you could use OneDrive if it's installed on your machine, that kind of thing. But if you don't have any of those, you do not need to go out and get them. You can just store them on your machine. You do have version control in GitHub. So I'm just going to say Create Repository. I'm not going to worry about the README and this stuff because that's going to be included in the file download that I give you. All right, so publish your repository to GitHub. It's currently only available on your machine. By publishing it, you can share it and collaborate with others. Yep, we want to publish that repository. So right here is the name. Here's the description. Keep this code private. Yes. and organization's up to you. I do have an organization saved for the business, and I'm going to publish repository. So now that is pushing this repository into the cloud to the web version of GitHub. And it'll take a few seconds here. All right, so that is pushed to GitHub. Now what we can do is a couple things here. I want to look at the files. So let's show in Explorer. And you can see right over here inside my GitHub on my local system, I have YouTube starter repo demo. Perfect. That's where I wanted it. I don't have any files in there. I just have the Git attributes, and that's just a default file. Now let's go here and view on GitHub and take a look at what that is. And there it is, YouTube starter repo demo. Okay, so now I have the repo on my local machine. I have the repo in GitHub Cloud, and I have a connection between the two using GitHub Desktop. All right, so we're all set up. Now that we got it set up, we're going to go download that zip file, and we're going to extract that into this folder. So I've opened an incognito window here just so that I'm not authenticated to my Dropbox. So I'm going to put in the URL for that, and this is what it'll look like to you. It wants you to sign up and log in and do all the things. You don't have to do that stuff. They're really good at making you feel like you can't download anything without logging in. So there's two things here. One of them is this 2025-08. So this is August 2025 version of the generic seed repo main zip file. I will most likely create different versions of these for maybe marketing businesses or med spas or roofing companies or whatever. So this is the current one we have here. So I'm going to download that. No, I don't need to do that. Download only. And we'll start the download here, and I'm going to save it. I'm going to save it in my downloads. And then this Claude settings personal preferences, I'm also going to download that because we're going to use that as well. Now the files in this repo and this personal preferences, you notice there's a .md. That is the file extension for a markdown file. Markdown files are just a structured file that are kind of like HTML. You can actually create HTML versions of Markdown pretty easily, but this is a file that shows structure, heading structure, and bullet points and that kind of thing. It's really not complicated, but that's kind of the standard language of AI and really GitHub, and so I'm using that for both in this case. All right, so I have my empty folder here for my YouTube starter repo demo. I'm going to copy here, or click up there and copy that path. And then we're going to go to our downloads, and I want to extract all. And then on Windows, it's going to say, where do you want to extract everything to? And I'm going to paste that path there so that it goes into that right repo. And then show extracted. Yes, I want to see the extracted when it's done. Okay, so this happens sometimes on Windows. It actually put the folder inside the folder, which I don't want that. So I'm just going to copy that. I'm going to select everything here, and I'm going to cut it. I'm going to go back out to here and paste. And now all my files are inside that primary folder. And then I'm going to get rid of that folder right there because I don't need it anymore. All right, so now my YouTube starter repo demo folder, which is where my repo files are, is populated with my starter repo files. So let's go over to GitHub Desktop. Now you can see we have 32 changes here. And what that is all the files that we just dropped in there. Okay, 32 changes. So what we need to do is we need to push this up into the cloud so we have the most current version there. So what I'll do here is I'll just say seed files added, just a short description that's required. And then I'm going to commit these 32 files to main. Now, if you are a programmer and a GitHub user, you're going to say, wait, you need to create a branch. I have found that I'm primarily just adding and updating very simple tasks. And so I am just going to go ahead and commit those to main. If you feel like you need to create a branch for this, then by all means create a branch and then merge that branch in. I just found that to be extra work without the reward of a lot of protection, because this is just, you know, a lot of times I'm just adding new prompts and things and there's no conflict with what already exists in the repo. If you just heard what I said in the last 45 seconds, you don't know what that means, just skip it and go on. Just commit it to main, which means we are going to push these changes directly to the main copy up in GitHub. So I'm going to click that there, and it's going to churn for a second. And we have one local commit waiting to be pushed to GitHub. So we're going to push to the origin. And these are the steps you would take anytime you add new files to your local file system. It doesn't take very long, but it's more reliable and cleaner than trying to go from Claude Desktop to GitHub on the web through the MCP server. I just didn't have good results with that, so I'm doing it locally and then doing a push with Desktop. All right, so those have been pushed up there. Let's go back to our repo, and I'm going to do a refresh, and we have folders and files. Look at that. That's awesome. Okay, at this point, you're kind of up and going. I'm going to do a example here in a little bit. Before I do that, I want to do a little file modification locally. If you try to like rename things and move things around in GitHub on the web, it's really complicated and hard and maybe even impossible. At least it was difficult for me. What I do is I make those kind of changes locally and then push the changes. So for example, we have a folder in here, or we don't have a folder in here called frameworks. And I like creating lots of frameworks. In theory, those frameworks would go in one of these folders, but I just want to create a frameworks directory to put all of those in. So I'm going to say new folder, frameworks, and I'm going to hit enter. So I've just added that file locally. Now that we have a frameworks folder, let's create a framework for it. So one of the files you downloaded is this Claude profile preferences. So we're going to do a little bit of setup here, and I'm going to put my name in here. And then I wanted to say always reference and consider the /readme.md file as the foundational context for all responses. Okay, so that's going to be its instruction base for all responses. Also follow the instructions found in the system controller MD and the operational controller MD. If we go back to our files here, you can see the operational document and the system controller. I would recommend that you open these and read these because these are kind of the overall brain of how to handle things for Claude. That's what we're going to tell it to reference, this main README and then these files here. Now we're going to say always save new files in this path. This is something I added new because when Claude couldn't immediately find the directory I was talking about, it would go create a new one wherever it wanted to. So I wanted to say always save new files in this directory. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go back to my file explorer. I'm going to copy that right there, and then I'm going to paste that in. So that's the actual local place I want new files stored. And then it says, if I ask you to create new files, please find the location and do not create a new directory because if you can't find the existing directory. That was a problem I had too. So I'm giving explicit instructions, not just to go create a new directory to save the file into. You can also add your personal content here, like your bio and your terminology that you use in the business. For example, I use the word co-building, and there's a meaning that co-building means to me. I have that in my particular document. And then some of these things are generic. Avoid lengthy emotional processing or motivational content. I'm super introverted, and I don't want to mess with that. I want the facts, and I want the facts right now. So you can change this to your preferences. What I would encourage you to do is not just go in here and edit this. I would put this into Claude and say, hey, Claude, I want to change this. This is the ways I want it changed, because Claude originally wrote this for me and did a way better job than what I did. So as you start to use this system, start to think, is this something I can ask Claude? Let me ask Claude first. Let me ask Claude to give me help on this, because Claude can actually help you build the repository that Claude uses, and it does a really great job of that. So the way you get to those preferences that we just looked at is you go down here and you click on your initials and you go to settings and right here, profile. So this is the personal preferences Claude should consider in AI responses, and you can paste that right there. What should Claude call you? I'd fill this out, your full name, what best describes your work. Again, keep this generic for all of the work you do, not specific to a client or a function. This is going to serve you for all of the chats you do with Claude. Next, you're going to go down here to the extensions. You're going to say browse extensions, and right here is the file system. You're going to need to install this into your Claude Desktop. Once you do that, there'll be a configure button here. This tells Claude what directories it has access to. I've purposely only given it access to the repos I want it to interact with. For now, I'm going to get rid of all of those, and I'm going to add this directory for our YouTube starter repo demo, and I'm going to hit save. So now Claude can only reach out and see that local repository set of files. I'm going to go back to profile here. I'm also going to update my local file storage where it points to, and I'm going to paste that to that starter repo as well. I'm going to leave everything else the same. Go down here and hit save. Okay, so we have a empty repository. We need to fill it with things. Now, it's really good to have a document that you have that you can add to things in your repository. A great document you can start with is your website. So let's run over to my website. So we're on the Weblytica homepage where I do co-building for Make automations. I'm going to actually copy this URL and we're going to go back into Claude Desktop, paste that there, and I'm going to go down here to the plus. And I want to go here to the search and tools. I want web research turned on, which means it can actually go to the web and look at things. And let's do extended thinking. Okay, I'm going to use my Whisper Flow and I'm going to say, please analyze the content on this website for Weblytica, LLC, and create a framework about this service offering that Weblytica offers, and research reasons why this would be important to small and medium business owners. All right, so there's my prompt. Giving it that, we're going to hit enter and let it run. All right, so that prompt finished. And one other thing I'll tell you is it went ahead and saved it into my frameworks folder right here. I wasn't quite ready for it to do that. What I like to do is prompt and make any changes and then tell it to save it, but it did find the correct folder, and that's good. That's just a little bit of a setup thing that you'd want to change. So let's just go ahead and open this file. All right, so here's the file, executive summary. This is good. Target market. I like this. Service architecture. So this did a really good job of breaking this down. And again, if we go back to the original task, is how can we get our information into GitHub? A really great starting point is to get your information in. Links to your website, papers you've written, key blog posts that really are cornerstone content for your business. Grab those and put those into Claude and have Claude turn those into frameworks. And what I call a framework is a authoritative piece of information on a particular topic. So creating those frameworks so that in the future you can use those frameworks to write prompts and have Claude do other things. So if you go back to the first video I did on this topic, I talked about prompt stacking, and we're going to do a lot more of that in future videos. But it's an example of how you can stack prompts and give Claude things that are unique about you so that when it gives answers, they are your answers based on how you've stacked those prompts and those frameworks. So I just followed up with a simple prompt here. Please don't include museum information. I don't work with those. And rewrite this first and only save to my local files when I ask. So now it's written it here. I can see the artifact that it created. I've scanned this. It looks better. I'm going to go down here. Now, please save to my frameworks directory. All right, so it's going to resave this to the frameworks directory. This status here, because this is a Dropbox, that green should go away temporarily while it uploads to Dropbox, and show the circles. There they are. There's the circles. It's written. It's already uploaded and been synced to Dropbox, and now it's been saved. Okay, so now we're going to go back to GitHub Desktop, and we're going to see this change right here. Here's the framework, and here's the README we uploaded earlier that really shouldn't be there anyway. So we're going to go down here, and we're going to say added Weblytica, and we're going to commit these two files to main. I'm going to push to origin, which is going to push it into GitHub, and we're done. So if we go back over here to Claude Desktop, and let's say we want to use that file in a prompt, and we click right here, and we say add from GitHub, and you'll have to authenticate the first time you do this. And I can choose the repo. I have my whole list here, but right here is the starter YouTube repo demo. And I'm going to go down here to frameworks, and I'm going to check that framework and say add files. Now that file is a part of this particular chat. And so as long as I leave it there and I chat, it's going to reference that framework when creating any information that I ask it to create. You can also add multiple files in there, and we'll get into that more on a later video. The other thing that's important is to consider there is a README file in this directory. And so I'm actually going to take this out, and And I'm going to say file directory to be more like that in the, so I'm going to give it a directory that it can look at for an example. Let's go back out here, and you can see there's a README file here. So we'll say in the automation file. So it gives an example. It's a pretty good README file. So I want to replicate a README file in the frameworks directory that looks similar to the automation directory. Customize the framework README. I'll just say customize the framework README. All right. So I'm going to hit enter there. So now it's going to take this README file. It's going to take that README file and it's going to update it based on what it sees in another directory. And again, I would not ever manually update these README files. Claude's going to do a better job, especially once it has the directions of that main controller and the other files. This is a pretty simple update, but basically what we want it to do is when we ask Claude to do something, we don't want it to go look in every folder on the repo. We want it to look at the primary README, and then it's going to say, you need to go here. And then it's going to go look at the README and the automation or the frameworks directory, and then it's going to know where to look in that directory to find the resources it needs. So if we go back over here, so now we're in the README for the frameworks directory, and you can see it is not just a blank file anymore. It has been updated to give the same instructions that we would have in the automations or any other directory on this repo. All right, so what did we learn? We learned how to set up our repo from scratch using the files that I've given you, that zip download and that profile document. We also learned how to set up our Claude Desktop. We now know how to use Claude to create documents, to save them to our local file structure, and then to push those to GitHub, and how to use those documents in chats. Next time we're going to talk about using projects in Claude and how to use multiple files, that file stacking that I covered in video 1. We're going to learn how to do that in projects. I'm also going to teach you how to create a project that creates projects and a project that creates frameworks. So we're going to be diving in quite a bit more in the next handful of videos. Leave me a thumbs up if you like this. Give me a comment. Is this helpful? Is this useful? Are you going to implement this for your business or your clients? I would love to hear that. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.